Yes, I did. I kept to a Victorian Englishwoman's personal timetable for a week, and unsurprisingly, I learned a lot. Well, hello and welcome back to The Commonplace. My name is Autumn, and today we are going to talk about a fun thing I did for the last week, which was follow Charlotte Mason's personal timetable. But before we do, I've been gone for a couple of weeks, just took a break. Actually, really just didn't have anything I wanted to talk about, and that is a good reason to not talk on the internet. But I had a couple of things happen, and so I want to make sure that we just do some housekeeping really quickly here at the start. So real fast, like maybe less than 2 minutes. You ready? First, I was interviewed over on the More Christ podcast. I had a lovely time talking to the host Marcus about all things Charlotte Mason, how she fits in classical tradition, the whole stream, things about the imagination, authority, habit training, why I don't like the ages and stages of the neoclassical movement, all sorts of things. And I'm going to link that above so that you can go and listen to our conversation, as well as hopefully peek around his YouTube. He has talked to a lot of fascinating people, philosophers, writers, poets, theologians. He has an amazing spread of conversations about all sorts of things. And so I highly recommend you check that out. And also you can listen into mine. And honestly, I think it's a great starter interview for Charlotte Mason for someone who has heard some of the buzzwords or the phrases but doesn't understand how to interpret them, define them, or understand how they work in real life. Then I think that's the perfect type of interview to share or listen to. And so please go listen to that. Also, I am hosting a webinar with my friend Amanda Foss. She is one of the ladies over at the Wonder Years podcast and also the writer over at the Substack, The Classical Woman. And she will be talking about the habit of attention, but not just for our children, for ourselves as well. So if you feel like you are always distracted, you can't maintain a 20-minute lesson, you can't remember what you were supposed to be doing at the time in which you were supposed to be doing it, don't feel alone. We live in an age of a fragmented attention, a disordered attention, and she is going to pull from the writings of those throughout the classical tradition, like St. Basil the Great, Charlotte Mason, things like that, people like that rather, and talk to us about how we cultivate a habit of attention, how it awakens our souls to the world around us. And so that's going to be part one. It actually runs on Tuesday, the 14th, and then on the 21st, a week later, we will team up to do a live Q&A call in which we answer the questions that have been submitted after the first one. And so even if you can't make the calls live, of course, there will be replays emailed out after the second one, and so you'll get kind of a package email, but I wanted to make sure you know about that. There will be a link right up here so you can learn more and hopefully join us. I think we'll have a really great time doing that together. And then lastly, the Virtues and Vices fall course in Common House has launched with a 3-week introduction, because that is how I roll, and it is, I think it's going to be helpful, and I think it's going to be contemplative, and I think there's going to be a lot of great fruit from thinking about these ideas. And so we are looking at virtues and vices as understood kind of generally from a philosophical and Christian church history standpoint, as well as digging into kind of thinking about our own souls and where we're at, because that is the point of education. And so I've structured the course in a very Charlotte Mason way. We start with inspiring ideas, we start with reflection, we start with a picture study. And so it's a really good time, and you can find that in Common House and more information up here. So with all of that, let's get to Charlotte Mason's timetable. Now, I do not own The Story of Charlotte Mason by Essex. If you've seen the title, I'm just put her name right here. You're gonna know why I can't figure out how to pronounce this woman's last name. But it's not one that I own. However, I have heard that it has many timetables in it for Charlotte Mason's personal life, the way she actually did her day-to-day things when she was running the House of Education, when she was running her schools, when she was actually teaching. There's kind of just different time periods of her life in which she has her timetables. Timetable is schedule, sorry. If you're new to Charlotte Mason, it's just the, I assume, British way, if not the European way of saying schedule. And I found one over at Charlotte Mason Poetry, and it was laid out really nicely, and I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to see if I could follow this for a week? Part of my week was our term break week, and so I didn't have to be at certain things like co-op. Some of our fall extracurriculars had finished, like soccer, and so we had our evenings open again, and I thought it would just be a really fun way to spend my off week. And it absolutely was a fun thing to do. And what I found is that Charlotte Mason may have cracked the code on the most humanizing timetable I've ever seen. And so we're gonna run through it. I'm actually going to put Charlotte Mason's timetable up for you so you can see it. And of course, we're going to note that I was not able to follow it to a T. This was not the letter of the law, it was the spirit of the law. There are times in which you must note that Charlotte Mason was not actively teaching during this timetable. She did not have children herself, and of course she was not her own cook or her own maid. I am a cook and a maid, and so I could not stick to this perfectly, but I did stick to the spirit of each time block. and I actually made some really fun observations. So, Charlotte Mason, first off, according to this timetable, got a lot of sleep. That was the first thing I noticed. From what we know in this particular timetable is that her day didn't really start publicly until about 9:30. And so pre 9:30, she did her morning routine, would have gotten ready, had her own Bible time, different things like that. And even if you were kind of a slow mover, I cannot imagine that means she was up far before 7. It's 2.5 hours to do those things. Most moms would never dream of having an hour to get ready, particularly homeschool moms. We might dream of an hour in the morning where everyone's still asleep and we can read and we can maybe write, we can commonplace, we can maybe start a little laundry, just kind of get a little bit ahead on the day, but we're not thinking we're gonna have an hour just to get ready. So I started my day on my Charlotte Mason timetable between 7 and 7:30. That's late for a homeschool mom. I think most people know that. It definitely felt luxurious. It was definitely sleeping in, and I was just barely awake before my kids. And so I gave myself enough time to do the things that had been mentioned for her pre-9:30 time. Enough time to read my Bible, enough time to get ready before I was going to be greeted by the children. And that was a great start time, because guess what? Mason is in bed with her favorite novel by about 8:30, 8:45. So my guess is that Mason was clocking at least 9 hours of sleep. 9 hours, maybe 10, depending on how long she could read. I know most moms get pretty tired when they start reading at night, and it's very easy to clunk out. In fact, I've made the observation of myself that if I am reading at 8:45, I will be asleep by 9:10. If I am on a computer at 8:45, if I'm watching a movie at 8:45, I could easily be up until midnight. There's something about removing the machine and doing the person thing that your body naturally is like, yes, it is time for rest. And rest, if you watch my self-care video or my embodied self video, caring for an embodied self, you know that sleep is so important. And yet we moderns sleep less hours than I think historically have ever been slept. And I was just really encouraged by Charlotte Mason about how much sleep I could actually get, which also takes me to the embodied self of that she ate 3 meals a day, and she also had tea. And I'm pointing this out because for the homeschool mom, it is so easy to feel like you start the day and you're already running and you're just gonna have coffee for breakfast, or you're not gonna eat lunch after lessons because really you're just gonna pick from the kids' plates while you're cleaning up, right? Because you have to keep going to the next thing for afternoon occupations, or you have lessons, there's violin or there's cello or there's art or something. And it's just so easy to skip out these things. And yet Mason had these very scheduled breaks, and those weren't her only breaks. She actually had a break in the morning as well, which we'll get to. So anyways, we get to that 9:30 start time, and according to this timetable, again, all credit to Charlotte Mason Poetry for putting this up and figuring it out, was that she would start with a variety of things. She would keep up with her correspondences, she would manage household tasks, she would look over the menu, she would look over accounts, things like that. So I do not have household workers to manage. I guess I kind of do. They're just a lot smaller than these cooks and maids and perhaps carriage drivers would have been. But I did like the block to go ahead and handle things like menu planning. I do have to do the menu planning. I do have to make the grocery list. I actually did keep up with my correspondences much better in the last week. So if you're someone, which is a very classical mom thing to do, you like the idea of handwriting letters. I have a number of pen pals, and I am notoriously slow on responses with pen pals. One, I think when you get in the habit through email with correspondences, side note, you can send as much as you want, you can backspace really easily, you can make it sound really deep, you can really get your full thought out. When you're writing by hand, you can't. You mess up, it's there, everyone can see it. You're limited in a number of ways. The amount of time you have, so you have to write less because it takes longer to write than to type. You are limited to how perfect you can make it because you're a human writing on actual paper with pen, and so everyone can see any mistakes you make, if it's not grammatically correct, if you went down a rabbit trail, whatever, it's right there. And also, I actually think this is a great thing in the limitation, is that it forces you to be succinct and to be focused. And in order to keep up your pacing then with correspondences, you have to just write more briefly and more about ordinary things. And yet that is where we are often learning these things of God. The uncommon things are happening in our common things. And I think it's really lovely, but I'm notoriously slow with letters. I am now caught up. I caught up with 9 people this week. And it was not because I sat around writing endless letters all morning. It was just, I tackled about 15 minutes of a letter every day and ended up some of them getting through them in 15 minutes. And again, they weren't very long, but I was able to write them, get them sent, get them in the mail, post them internationally, some of them. I felt very accomplished with this because it's one of those things that I always think, this is going to take so much time, I don't have time to do it. Also, I do like using the wax seal in my little tree emblem, my stamper, but I did not pull that out because I was just trying to stick to the time and keep moving, and I just dealt with my correspondences in a timely manner. So thank you, Charlotte Mason. I'm gonna keep doing that as I have letters, and hopefully I will be able to enjoy the great gift that is a correspondence with a friend far away, because I think it's a really lovely habit to cultivate. And then I would handle household things. So that could literally be throwing a load of laundry in before the school day started, or catching up on something with my husband, or making sure I took care of something that, you know, I needed to do. And again, it was never a super long block of time. It was just the start. Now for Mason, she then went into basically her office hours, right? She was not teaching. Previously in her life, she had been teaching in the morning. And so for the next bit, which was her work for like reviewing parents' review articles, maybe doing her own writing, her own reading, things like that, I was schooling my children. That is my work. As much as I love the commonplace and all things common mom and common house, my work is homeschooling my children. It's where I put my best, it's where I put my focus. I don't let other things encroach upon it. If so, they have to go, like the month break I took. And so it's really important to me that that is my main work of the day. And so that's what I spent my hours doing. Right around 11, she takes her first rest break. It's 20 minutes and she reads social satire. We are big fans of 11Cs, but when we started school, we started taking our tea break at 10 because it was the middle of our lessons block, and we did 10-minute tea break. So one, I was delighted to already kind of be on Mason's like brainwave on this, but we just slid it a bit. So we did 10 to 10:20 instead of 11 to 11:20, because again, the spirit of the thing is taking a break, recognizing that after hard labor, you need a little something warm in your cuppa, and maybe some cake. So that's what we did. And we had our tea, and social satire I did not read. And so we had our own reading time. If you look at the different ways Mason reads throughout the day, it's pretty regimented. I mean, this is very much time blocking. If you're listening, you're gonna think she time blocks. Okay, everyone knows how to do that. But I like it more because it's Mason-y, and it's far more humanizing than machine-oriented, which is, I feel like, the undertone of the time blocking conversation. And so we're gonna avoid time block language here. But she shows that there needs to be this alternating way of life. And if you are familiar with Mason, you know she does the same thing with students. You alternate the subjects. You alternate mental effort with physical effort, mental rest with physical rest, spiritual effort with spiritual rest. You do all of this for your children, and I loved seeing her do it for herself. I do use all of this educational philosophy to talk about just living as persons. In fact, a lot of chatter in Common House, particularly about my interview with Marcus, was about you need to just take these ideas and pull them out of homeschooling so everyone can hear them and just start talking about them in that way, which is kind of my humanizing living conversation that I'm always jumping in and out of. But it's because these are just things for person. So if they are good for your kids, if this is how you think about ordering your children's timetable or schedule, consider if you're doing the same for yourself. And that is one of the things that stuck out with Mason, is she does do this back and forth, giving herself heavy labor where she's very focused and she's very diligent. I'm assuming, I wasn't there, but the way it's laid out on paper. And then she has these rest breaks. And with her reading blocks, oh, that's where I was going, right? She has very set reading blocks throughout the day where she focuses on a novel or a biography or some sort of like political newspaper, social satire, travel. She kind of moves between them. A classic, which we're gonna talk about, the 10-minute classic everyone knows about. And it's just neat to see how widespread she read because she ordered herself, and none of it is a huge ask. 10 minutes. 20 minutes, something that you definitely could take a little piece of and add to your day. So from then about 11:20 to 12:15, she continued on with her morning work. For us, this was of course finishing up our morning lessons, getting cleaned up, moving into our instrument practice, things that we already have kind of organized in our day before I started prepping lunch. Because again, I don't have a cook. In all the great books and all the great real life stories, they all have cooks, but I do not. And so I had to be in the kitchen cooking, but I did try to put on an audio book or something so which I could participate in Mason's 10-minute classic. And I will tell you that having 10 minutes every day, you actually, I think, do make more progress than am I in the mood to read this classic. I am still working through the Odyssey. I'm hoping to finish it before this year ends, and I'm very much enjoying it, but almost never want to go read it. And this is probably still a deficiency in me, like I'm not well formed yet. I'm not dying to go read it. But I just had this 10 minutes every day, and I moved through far more pages than I've moved in the previous weeks of, oh, I guess I'll read it from Mother Culture just one time, 30 minutes. And then of course we know how often we interrupted in Mother Culture time and different things like that. And if I just based it on when I want to pick it up, maybe not gonna pick it up. But the regular habit of a 10-minute a day and a classic, probably a really good one for us to adopt. And I bet you would make your way through something like the Odyssey in about, I don't know, 6 to 9 months. That's just a guess. Just feels good in my gut. So at 1 o'clock, she would have dinner with the students, and I also had dinner with the students, also known as lunch with my children. And so that was at 1 o'clock. And after that, there's a whole section of reading for travel, biography, things like that, before 2:15 when she would get out of doors. I liked that there was a whole hour and 15 minutes. Maybe her lunch did last an hour. Maybe they had amazing conversations. My kids are between the ages of 6 and 3. We are hilarious at the table, but we do not have lengthy conversations yet. And so we're often done with lunch by like 1:20, right? And so we would get cleaned up and get organized so we could prepare to get out of doors. And I live at Mason as a very busy professional woman, was outside from 2:15 to 4. And when her health started to fail her, she still would ride in a carriage outside from 2:15 to 4 if she couldn't walk with the students. But we would just get out of doors. I love being out of doors. You must too if you're a Charlotte Mason mother. And that was our afternoon. And then we would come back and we had to reorder some things because Mason was eating supper far too late for our family. So at 4, she would take daily tea. We usually do it 3, but we tried to shift to 4, just for the sake of being outside from 2:15 to 4, using that block for what we were doing this week. And she would have tea time, and then she would meet with people, either with the vice president to review teacher, grad assistant. She would do interviews, things like that. And I kind of felt like during that entire time, I was also conducting interviews because my kids interrupt me and ask a lot of questions. And so that's basically being interviewed the entire afternoon. Then I would go into supper prep, or dinner. We still say dinner because we're Americans. So while from 6 to 7, Mason was reading an old favorite like Jane Austen or George Eliot, Thackeray, stuff like that, I was making dinner. That was our dinner time. But I would, again, try to use this time with an audiobook to listen to an old favorite that I knew well enough to kind of be in and out on. So I used Middlemarch, George Eliot, one of my favorite books. I would love to sit down and read for an hour like that, but that is not going to be feasible in my season of life. And that's okay. Again, the effort was getting there. I need to prepare food for my family. I need to take care of them, but I could put on a book and make sure that I was at least trying to get a touch point with what is already a well-known story for me. So at 7 was her supper, her daily supper. I don't know if she took this alone. There wasn't really a note about it. I obviously have to eat with everyone in my house. And so we really enjoyed dinner. I serve family style. We have candles. It's probably like a lot of your homes as well. And we hope to make it a really cheerful and exciting time for everyone to be at the table connecting at the end of the day. And so I kind of flipped those. I did our supper earlier, our dinner earlier, and then afterwards with cleaning, we had a little bit more time for leisure activities. So that would be trying to read a book or playing endless games of Go Fish and chess, which is what happens at my house with my kids. We just had that kind of time. Now on Tuesdays, she would do these Scale How nights. And one person, I don't know if it was always her, but they would come and give basically like a biography about a favorite artist and kind of tell everyone about them, give an oral recitation presentation sort of thing. And then everyone else would bring different art that kind of corresponded with the person or the person's life or the ideas or whatever like that. I thought about trying to do that honestly with my kids. Like I thought I will just choose C.S. Lewis, or as everyone in this house calls him, Jack Lewis, and the kids could draw things and bring me Narnia pictures. But I don't know, it gets a little rowdy in the evenings with kids, I'm not gonna lie, and act like my house looks like an Instagram square, because it doesn't. It looks like pillow forts everywhere, built 2 minutes before bedtime, of course. And so it's kind of just the free-for-all evening runabout around here before bedtime. And so really my goal was to do bedtime well, do all of our normal things. That just has to stick. That routine couldn't change, but try to be in bed by 8:45 with a favorite novel. And so for her, of course, that was, oh, I meant to grab mine, the Waverly novels. Hang on. These, can you see? I don't know if you can. The Waverly novels. And so Sir Walter Scott, I have read these on a loop, probably the way I read the Chronicles of Narnia. And I actually came across this beautiful set, I mean, absolutely beautiful, at a library book sale. And it was books 1 to 25. There are 30. And they were ridiculously cheap, like maybe $28 or something. And they're beautiful. And so if you have 26 through 30 and you want to give them to me, shoot me an email or send me a message somehow, and I will buy them from you because I'm just missing the last 5. But I did try to read some Sir Walter Scott and really enjoyed it. Unfortunately for Sir Walter Scott, I was in the tail end of Little Men by Louisa May Alcott and couldn't put it down and loved it too much. And so I didn't get too far in literally reading what Mason read before bed, but I was reading my fiction novel at the time. And so, or my novel at the time, and that was a pleasant way to end the day. Now, of course, my evening time was interrupted by things like half asleep toddlers and like rage fits about pajamas and different things, like, you know, when they crawl out of bed and they have no idea what's happened, they're completely disoriented, things like that, or just needs of the household. And so I wasn't able to perfectly to stay uninterrupted in my reading time ever, but that is the life of the mom and it is fine. But I really found that I enjoyed this rhythm of the day. I'm actually going to adopt a lot of this into my daily timetable. Now, a couple of things that I did note as observations: this would never work for me as someone who kind of works. I do have a work block on Thursdays where I have about 7 hours to do all commonplace things. It's after we finish lessons for the day. My husband's an entrepreneur, and so that's something that we've been able to make work for us. But I need that time. With this schedule, I have zero time to get any work done because I'm not working all evening. I'm not working to the early hours of the morning, different things that I've done in other seasons. And so this schedule would not actually work for me if I didn't have my Thursday. So that's part of it. And also with a schedule like this, you have to be very prepared for everything. So it is, again, kind of like time block in that you move through things at certain times. And I have found that with my personality, if I don't know where I'm going in that time, I can waste half of it just trying to get organized. Like, well, what was I going to be doing right now? I forget. What was the book I was going to cover? What notes did I need to take? What was going to happen for the kids? What do they need for soccer tonight? So I am just someone who is very much focused on the pre-prep or the planning stage so that you can then act intentionally. And that is very necessary for something like this. And then the last observation I made is something that I've read before in Memoriam about Charlotte Mason, that her house of education, the things she did, they never felt hurried. The teachers who came through always knew there was a proper time to do everything, and everything would get done in proper time. And so you did not feel rushed. You were not running around like, I can't get everything done. I'm so stressed. I'm so tired. I can't eat. All things that I regularly hear from homeschool moms that I know and love. It just seems to be like accepted, like the homeschool mom starter pack is also that you're going to be harried and tired and frazzled. But I don't think it has to be that way. One, I don't think people can live that way. I don't think it's good for persons in mind, body, or spirit. But also, Charlotte Mason shows you don't have to, but you do have to be intentional and you do have to be focused. And of course, you must respect that certain things must be done when they must be done. So the same way you tell your child, this is 20 minutes of math, and this is when math must be done, or else there are negative consequences. If you don't do what you need to do at the right time, there will be negative consequences. Often I think that it's that you don't get to sleep enough. So take a page from Charlotte Mason. Again, I will pop her timetable back up if you want to like pause and scribble it down and see what fun things you can do in your world. Otherwise, I will be back soon. I have some fun Christmas-oriented videos coming your way about books and ideas that you might need in your wheelhouse to contemplate, to perceive, and to act upon. I'll see you guys soon.